retirement. I'm going to use my Bitcoin for my retirement, and I'm going to pass my Bitcoin down to my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to do. And how am I going to do that? Since it appreciates 200% on average for the past 10 years, let's just say that it doesn't. Let's say it appreciates 100%.
Mm-hmm.
It's still appreciating, right?
Right.
So if I hold that asset, and let's say I take out a loan on that Bitcoin 5 years from today, when Bitcoin, let's say, I don't know what it's going to be. I'm going to throw a number out, and don't quote me on this. I'm not saying I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what it's going to be, but let's just say that it's about 500,000 for one Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unrealistic.
Right.
I can leverage that 500. I can leverage one Bitcoin and maybe take out a loan to value that's really, really low. Let's say 5% loan to value.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it has to drop 95% for my loan to get liquidated.
Yeah.
And
for it to be considered as a risk.
Right, to be a risk. So that's me mitigating the risk.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take that loan out and pull the cash out, I can live on that cash for the whole year.
Welcome back to It Starts Now, the Happy Hour Finance and Business. My name is Stanley. I have a good friend today on today's episode, and we're going to go and discuss a lot of things when it comes to Bitcoin. I'm super excited because this is the guy that I kind of reach out to when I need to know information about cryptocurrencies, about the currency assets. So he's a good source of information. We're going to tap in. We're going to talk about not just Bitcoin, but how do you leverage Bitcoin? How do you loan from it? And a whole sorts of questions that we're going to ask him today. We're going to do a deep dive. But please, welcome my guy, Shane.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here, Mr. Lane. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. I hope I can add some value to your viewers as far as Bitcoin is concerned. So thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, let's get rid of the Lane part. Because I know you for too long.
Stand the man.
Listen, I'm super, super excited that you're able to come on the show. Is something that you've been investing in this for such a long time, since 2017, or probably a little longer than that. So you know a lot about Bitcoin. You know a lot of the history of Bitcoin. And you're probably my go-to guy when I need to know certain information when it comes to Bitcoin. Before we begin on everything, I want for you to introduce yourself, but also introduce your investment company, right? Because you have an investment club that you guys are associated with. It's your company with a group of about 80 people, I believe. But go ahead and introduce yourself and the company.
Well, like Stan said, I'm Shane Skeffrey. Knew this guy since, it's probably 20 years now. Right. So I'm excited to be here. So pretty much I'm a part of an investment club where it's about 80 of us. We got together in about 2017. We actually started out not as a club. We started out we had a webinar where we were learning about cryptocurrencies, and the gentleman that had the webinar wanted to create an ICO, which is an initial coin offering. So back in that time, a lot of companies were getting started in the industry and starting from scratch. So we wanted to invest in that ICO, but in order for us to do that, we had to form some type of an organization so that we could do it as an accredited investor, because we weren't individually accredited at that time. So we decided to form our company, our Blockchain Investor Group International, Biggie. So, I'm from Brooklyn, so, Biggie. So that's one of the themes that we have. But we initially got started on that aspect, and then it kind of transformed into more than that. It transformed into an all-out investment club where we don't just invest in crypto, we invest in all asset classes. So in 2017, I got started with Bitcoin and other cryptos, and for me, it's more about changing the dynamics of the generation that's coming behind and getting information that we didn't get. So this offered me an opportunity to learn more about assets and how to allocate my resources properly. And I serve as a VP on the investment club right now. As Stan said, there's about 80 of us. So pretty much that's what it is. Outside of that, I have a corporate background, been in corporate America for over 20 years too, so I understand that. And initially my goal was to climb the corporate ladder. So that's my mindset going in early. But what I learned was that ladder kind of was leaning against the wrong building, kind of sort of, where, you know, you want to get ahead in life, but if you're exchanging your time for money, after certain point in time, you can't really get that much back. You only have 24 hours in a day. Right. So for lack of, I don't want to go into too much detail with that, but long story short, I decided to look outside of the corporate structure to figure out how can I make money that I can pass down to my daughter, which is one of the biggest keys, Sky, and shout out to Sky, that she can learn about investing, learn about money, sound money, which we're going to get into when we talk about Bitcoin. So that way, it's not just about working for someone else and then paying you. It's about working for yourself or partnering with other people and figuring out a way to kind of leverage everybody's intellectual resources to kind of come up with something big.
Oh, that's what's up, man. We could go dive in on your history because I know so much about you on a personal level, right? You've always been a competitive guy, and I know that kind of drives you, right? That drives you because you were part of this. What is the company again?
Amway.
Amway, right? You're part of Amway. You immerse yourself into that lifestyle because you like the message that they were delivering and everything about it, right? And then you took the information and the way they structured their business and the way the leadership model was, and then you decided to use that as a tool to get yourself ahead. But you already had the competitive edge. How did you think that, or why did you think that being so competitive, and this was left field, right? How did you think that Bitcoin was going to be successful today in 2017, right? Or even sooner? What made you think this is the new direction when it comes to money, sound money?
Well, I mean, I guess, I was getting a lot of information. And one of the things that I learned, you mentioned Amway, is that a lot of times we try to figure things out on our own, but you can't figure something out that you don't know about. You got to learn about it first. And then once you learn about it, then you can make decisions. And you got to learn from other people that's already been down the road. Right. So one of the gentlemen that was very instrumental and to this day, still a source of information. His name is Mark Moss. He has his own newsletter. He was writing a bunch of cryptocurrency newsletters back then. And I was getting a lot of wealth of information from him to learn about Bitcoin as a currency. Well, really not a currency, but learn about Bitcoin in general. So from the experience in Amway and the mentorship and just the mindset to know that you can't figure out or change a problem that you have with the same thoughts that got you into that problem. You got to learn from someone else that has knowledge and information that you don't have. So I pulled a lot of information from this individual. I met him in Atlanta. I think it was about 2018 or so. And because I like to, when I start going in and kind of get information from people, I want to see if this person is actually who they say they are.
Yeah, the character.
Right. Yeah. So when I met him, I was blown away. This gentleman, he started multiple businesses, was very successful at a young age, ran a lot of companies. He had I would say maybe about 200 or so investment properties back in 2008. And forgive me if I mess up the numbers, but he was a multimillionaire. But what happened in 2008 is that, we had the big financial crisis and he lost everything. And the reason he lost everything is that he was actually over leveraged in real estate. So all of his investments was tied up in one asset class. He lost everything. And then he promised himself never to make that mistake again. So with that said, he started to look at alternative ways to invest his money. And Bitcoin came up on his radar. So he started diving in deeper, writing newsletters and sharing the information with us.
In Amway?
Not Amway.
Okay.
This is outside of Amway. This is the investment club that I'm a part of. Prior to us forming, the webinar I went to, he was a part of that webinar. He was giving information about Bitcoin. And we started to pull from that resource. And what I learned about Bitcoin at that time was that it was sound money. Now, when you get a term sound money, before we even get into what Bitcoin is, we have to talk about what money is.
Right.
So I did jot down a couple of notes, right? Yeah. Just so I could stay on task as far as money is concerned, so the audience understands. Because one of the things that we don't learn is we don't learn the value of money. We don't learn about money in school unless someone that we know has the information already that we can pull from. We have to figure it out on our own. You know, and again, as a Black community, sometimes you see we have the ability to create money, but we can't hold on to it. Right. So,
not to cut you off, but recently I read in the news that our spending, the Black and brown, especially Hispanics, but in the Black community is still high too. Our spending versus our earning is still higher than us producing. But go ahead.
And that's a fact. That's a fact. So to back it up a little bit about what is money, right? So money is really a medium of exchange, right? So back in the days, before we had the paper dollar, before we, you know, I get into gold, you know, before our money was backed by gold, we would exchange different things as currency, like even seashells or whatever was a form of money. And what happened was that prior to 1971, our money was backed by gold, right? So what that means is that the Federal Reserve Bank, and we'll touch on that a little bit about what that is, but the Federal Reserve Bank, they held the gold, and if you had, let's say you had $1,000, they would have $1,000 worth of gold back in that $1,000, right? So let's say that you wanted to go and get your gold, you would exchange your money for the gold.
Right.
So it's sound. But after 1970 or 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard and created fiat money. So fiat money just pretty means by decree. Fiat, the word means by decree. And that,
by decree basically means that somebody's telling you by law this is considered money.
Yeah, by decree means because I said so.
So yeah, trying to put it
right. So when they did that, the problem now is this: you have the Federal Reserve Bank, and for those of you, I'm not going to get into the details of that because that's a rabbit hole. But if you want to learn about that, there's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you read that book, it'll tell you about how the central bank got started, and you know they met in secret at at Jekyll Island in Georgia, I believe, and they formed the central bank to kind of control the money centrally.
Right, but let's keep in mind that the central bank's been there before.
Right, they had the Bank of England back in the days. So 100%.
This became the most powerful, dominant
100%. So there's been different central banks, 100%. Right. So when they did that, they created this bank. They centralized money, which is okay, because you know at that time that's what we had. That's what they knew. So they centralized the money. But then the problem is that when Nixon took us off the gold standard in '71, and there's a website, a good resource that you guys could go to is called WTF happened in 1971. And if you go to that website, it will show you what happened after we came off the gold standard. It's crazy, but now that we are off, the government was allowed to print money, and there was an unlimited supply of money. So now what happens is that when there's a limited supply of anything, especially the money, it erodes the purchasing power. So you're not able, for people that were taught, put your money in the bank, save your money. You'll have a whole bunch of money in the bank, but with this unlimited money printing, your purchasing power is getting eroded. So
because the value of the dollar starts to lessen.
Right. So if you have this supply and demand thing, right? So the more supply you have, there's too much supply. So your dollars is going down.
Right.
So one of the things that Mark taught me was the rich, the wealthy, they invest in assets that grow with inflation. So assets grow with inflation. So when the money supply is going up, the asset prices are going up. That's why like the houses are so high right now because of inflation. But for the poor people that don't understand money, they hold their wealth in dollars.
Right.
And their spending power is going down. So two problems: centralized, the government is centralizing the money, and unlimited money printing. So those are two problems that the money system has. So for you to combat that, Bitcoin is a technology, and a lot of people look at it as just, it's digital gold or it's currency, but it's more than that. It's a revolution, and every 50 years or so, there's a technological revolution where things change. Like, for example, at one point we were lighting candles, and that was light. And somebody came up with electricity. So people said, well, electricity, why would I want to have electricity when there's a candle? That's stupid, right? So Bitcoin is the technological advancement for money.
Yeah, the disruptor.
Right. So this guy's name, his name is Satoshi Nakamoto. He wrote a white paper back in 2008 of October, where he talked about Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer decentralized network where you can actually exchange this medium peer-to-peer without any government involvement. And he coded the technology where you are able to actually participate in the network. The money supply is limited, is a fixed amount, 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be supplied ever. So that's sound, you know what I mean? And one thing, let me back up for a second. Money, there's certain characteristics that it has, and I wrote them down so that way it is, I don't forget. So it's divisibility, it's durable, recognizability, portability, and scarcity. When it comes to those characteristics of money, Bitcoin, whenever you have new technology, the technology has to solve a problem that exists, right? As I said, the problem with money is that it's centralized and it's an unlimited supply, and it's going to erode your purchasing power over time through inflation. So that's where Bitcoin comes in.
My question is, and we're going to unpack a lot of the information that you shared in some time, but a lot of people to this day still don't think that Bitcoin is a store of value, right? And they still think that gold is primarily the resource that we're going to eventually go back to, right? Because gold doesn't erode in value, right? What do you think about that? What's your thoughts on it?
Right. So for the last 10 years, Bitcoin has been the best performing asset across all asset classes.
Right.
It's actually went up 200% over the last 10 years. There's nothing that even comes close to it. I think the S&P 500 was up 11% over the last 10 years. Gold, I believe, was up 1.5% over the last 10 years. So even inflation, if it's at 2%, which is what the feds are targeting, is actually beating gold. You get what I'm saying? Now, gold is sound money. So I do agree with you as far as gold being a good value to hold. The problem with gold, why Bitcoin is superior to gold, in my opinion, is that gold is not portable. So remember I told you about the characteristics of money, right? So it's divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability, and scarcity. So gold is scarce, gold is durable, gold has all those other qualities. Even divisibility is not that good to break down a gold bar and give it out as a medium of exchange, right? But the biggest
challenges is
challenges. So the portability aspect of it. If I want to give you gold or give you some gold, I would have to have some reserves in another location where you can access that gold. To move it around is not that easy. But Bitcoin now,
flexible.
Bitcoin, you can transfer Bitcoin around the world. So it's very portable.
It's a digital transaction.
It's pretty much digital gold. But I think the challenge that a lot of people have is when they look at Bitcoin, they don't look at it as a new technology. Satoshi Nakamoto figured out how to actually create sound money online. And the thing is that you have to wrap your head around technology, right? So technology, as I said about with fire, candles, and light. If I'm at that time where I'm using a candle and you tell me about electricity in the house, you're going to say I'm stupid and I'm an idiot. How am I going to put electric candles in the house? You can't wrap your mind around it because it's not something that you've ever seen.
It's not familiar.
You've never seen it. So that's why the technology of Bitcoin is the part that is exciting, and not just so the price itself. But as I said, it's been the best performing asset as far as a store of value for the last 10 years. And it's continuing on that trend. Every year since its inception, it's actually the lows of Bitcoin has been higher lows with the exception of just 1 year, right? So that's a good gauge. A lot of times when people look at Bitcoin, they look at it from a price action thing. The price is the last thing you want to look at. But go ahead.
You're right, because you want to look at it over time. And we discussed this before. When you look at things from a macro level, right, and see it over time, this is how much that it's been outperforming. but it has been doing some downtrend. Recently, it's going on an uptrend. But for the most part, I think people are scared. And and for me, my personal thing, right? My concern is that sometimes I don't want it to be like I'm feeling like I'm in like somebody's pumping and dumping. Like, oh, let's pump it now, and then all of like the stocks. Some people do that. They'll pump up the stock value, and then as soon as people jump in to buy to purchase, they jump out and then take the profits with them.
Right.
Is that something that can happen with Bitcoin?
Right. No, it can't. This is why. So again, remember, you're looking at the daily price action. Now, for me, as an investor, right? As an investor,
you have diamond hands, so you're gonna
yeah,
hold
no,
on
but
to
well, yeah,
investment for a long time.
but investing is different than trading, right? So if you're a trader and you're trading and you're looking at the price going up and down, then you're looking at the charts every day, and that's cool when you're doing technical analysis. But as an investor, what I was taught is that you don't go into any investment unless you're willing to hold that investment for at least 10 years.
Right.
Which means that I don't care what it's doing every day up and down, right? I also look with Bitcoin, it's a decentralized ledger where you can actually go online and see the addresses to see what addresses are moving.
Right.
What's happening is a lot of retail investors are actually the ones that are panicking and selling and buying and all of that based on the price action. But institutional investors, like I'm not sure if you're familiar with Michael Saylor. He's the CEO of MicroStrategy.
Right.
And his company in 2020, this 2020 now, started to invest in Bitcoin. His balance sheet, he had about 500 million in cash, and he wanted to figure out how he can put it in an asset that protects his cash from eroding because of the inflation.
Please elaborate on that.
Right. So when Michael Saylor, and just to give you some background about him, he's a graduate of MIT. He's the CEO of MicroStrategy. So this is a big corporation, right? And on his balance sheet, he was trying to figure out, okay, based on the lockdowns, when we got locked down, and then the Federal Reserve started to pump money into the system to prop up the assets. If you look at the stock market, it looks like it's going up. And I think it was a V-shaped recovery, if I'm not mistaken. It looks like we're good, but no, we're not good because that's just the asset. That's just the assets growing with inflation. But the reality of it is that your dollars in the bank are getting eroded because the inflation, the more money you put in the system, the less value the money is that you already have in the system because there's too much supply.
Right.
So he was like, we're going to lose money if we just hold it in the bank. And he has shareholders that he has to answer to. So he was trying to figure out what asset can I put the dollars in that will hold value over time. And he did a deep dive into Bitcoin. And this is an MIT grad. I mean, not for nothing, he's smarter than me. So let's just keep it a stat.
But he's one of the things that, like, for me, what I've been noticed is that a lot of big corporations, right, Main Street institutions, they're now investing heavy on Bitcoin. Because I remember one time where, what's his name from Chase? Jamie Dimon. So Jamie Dimon turned around and said, I won't invest in Bitcoin because Bitcoin won't last. And he broke down the reasons. A lot of it is because of regulation, and a few of it is because he felt that the government would eventually step in. But now you see like these main institutions are now buying heavily in Bitcoin. And recently I read somewhere that Facebook took a heavy dive. And they shared that had Facebook diversified by having Bitcoin within their portfolio, then they could have used that as leverage to protect themselves against some of the loss. So I agree with you. A lot of mainstreams are now investing into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is rising up there. But I think the factors that remain is, and the reason why I want to touch on inflation, because I didn't realize how much of a loss that we are taking daily through inflation. And a lot of us don't really, and I was one of them, I didn't really understand inflation until recently when I'm starting. I still don't really understand it fully, but I have a better stronghold of the idea and the concept behind the inflation and how it has a major impact on us. So for me, my question for you, I guess, is to say that, do you think that eventually, long-term wise, we're going to get rid of the dollar and move towards the Bitcoin?
I guess that's $1 million question.
Yeah, because
right.
by having the dollar,
so here's the thing, right? So remember, the dollar right now is controlled by the central banks, right? So they're not going to want that system to go away, right? Because that's where the power is, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, remember, technology is technology, and the thing is, if you try to stop technology, it may not work out for you in the long run.
Right.
You have to adjust to the technology because it's there.
Right.
So and because Bitcoin is such a disruptive technology, I believe, and this is just my opinion, that right now they're coexisting, and maybe they will find a way to coexist, the dollar and Bitcoin.
Right.
But ultimately, the problem, remember, the problem that we're trying to solve is this. Two problems: centralization, which is the banks owning everything, and unlimited money printing. Bitcoin solves those problems because it's decentralized.
Right.
No one controls this. This is no central organization controlling the Bitcoin.
Right.
And then it's a limited supply. So because of the network effect, where, if it's just me and you trading Bitcoin, it's just two people, that's not disrupting anything.
Right, right.
But if you have millions and millions of people around the world in this network trading,
right,
the technology is going to keep going, and by default, the government can't stop it.
Right.
Now they have done things like in different places. They're banned it in China, and the reason that they're banned it in China is some of the things that we talked about.
Right.
They want to keep control.
Right.
But what happens is that, and we didn't get into this, but I'm just going to touch on it a little. Bitcoin, the way it works is this, right? When it's on a system called a blockchain, and the blockchain is a technology where if you are creating, if you're a miner and you're mining the Bitcoin, like what happens at the computers, they have computers that are attached to the network, the decentralized network,
right?
And the computers solve problems, and when they solve a problem, they get rewarded with Bitcoin, and each block on the blockchain connects to the next block. It's a decentralized ledger, right? And I'm gonna slow it down just a second. So in bookkeeping, you have a ledger. In the banks, they have a ledger. They know whose address this is, who owns this amount of money. They update the ledger manually, centrally. But on the blockchain, the ledger is updated by the different people in the network.
Yeah.
It's millions of people in the network, right? So
that's where the smart contract comes in,
right? Well,
go ahead.
Well, what happens is that because of the ability for each miner to mine and solve the problem, they get rewarded with Bitcoin. It keeps putting in supplies of Bitcoin into the marketplace over time. Over time, it's not like all at once. Like every 4 years, the reward that they get. Let's say, for example. And don't quote me on the amount, but I believe when they solve the problem, they get, let's say, about six Bitcoin or something like that. But every 4 years, that cuts in half.
Right.
That reward cuts in half, so they get less until you get to the 21 million, where there is no more Bitcoin available.
Right.
So that's where the scarcity of the asset comes into play.
Okay.
As far as Bitcoin taking over, as far as the technology, you can't stop something that's decentralized. It's like when you were young and I was young, I don't know, some of the viewers may not know this, but there was something called Encyclopedia Britannicas, if you know what that is.
Yeah.
So I remember somebody coming to our door and be like, "Oh, we're selling Britannicas." I'm like, "What's that?" So heavy books with information in it.
Yeah.
But when the internet came around, people were like, "The internet? What is that? What is the internet?"
Right.
It's decentralized. It's not centralized. You can't stop the internet.
You can't control
you could try to you could try to stop the technology, but eventually the technology is going to win out. So when I look at Bitcoin, I don't look at it as just money. I'm putting in an asset to make money.
Yeah, I'm looking at it
as a technology that is disruptive. And because I look at it that way, I look at it from a different perspective, and I'm comfortable with the price action because I don't look at the price action.
Right.
You get what I'm
Because your
saying?
long-term vision.
Long
You're
term.
looking at it from a macro sense.
They can ban the Bitcoin as they did in China, but the miners, and I kind of digressed a little bit, the miners left China and went to different places to mine the Bitcoin, right? And they use computers to do the mining. The computers are what's solving the problems. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to stagnate your economy because you don't want to embrace the technology, but someone else is going to get the benefit of that technology.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So I'm more for maybe there's a medium where the dollar can exist with Bitcoin, but in my opinion, I think long term, the technology wins out because it's sound money.
I agree because technology hasn't been beaten. Right. It hasn't been beaten, and it's just like the internet. No one beats the internet, right? So it's a new technology, and I totally agree. But now let's unpack something because I have diamond hands, and I want to hold this investment for a long period of time, right? And I'm looking at it like, okay, it's not bringing me in money right now. I'm not trading it. I'm not doing any of those things. Now, how can I take advantage of it while still holding?
It's a good question. So the wealthy, they invest in assets called trophy assets, right? So pretty much what that means is that they find an asset that's scarce, and an asset that has a lot of demand for it. Let's say, for example, a beachfront property in California. There's not a lot of, real estate like that, right? So they find that and they invest in those, and then they leverage those assets. How do they do that? They borrow against the asset. So for Bitcoin, you can do that. You can use a Bitcoin as collateral, and you can actually borrow against it. So there are companies in the space that do that. And I'm not going to get into too much details of how the companies work, but I'm going to give you a high level. And then, the audience can dig into that themselves to figure out what makes the most sense for them.
Right.
So there's a company called BlockFi. And what they do is they allow you to put your Bitcoin up as collateral. And they have different loan to values. So let's say 50% loan to value, you put up a certain amount, they give you X amount of dollars back, and they hold the Bitcoin for you. And you can use that cash for whatever you want. But, whenever I speak, I always want to be very mindful of information, right?
Disclaimers.
So there's no investment advice. I'm not telling you what to do with your Bitcoin. I'm just telling you what you can do, right? So personally, unless you're going to borrow against a Bitcoin and use that money to go and put it in another asset, which is what the wealthy do. They'll borrow against their trophy assets, and they'll put it in another asset to generate more money, and they'll just keep recycling, rinse and repeat that process. So Bitcoin for the last 10 years, as we talked about, has appreciated over 200% for the last 10 years. So if you can figure out, okay, it's appreciated at 200%, I can get a loan from it, I can borrow from it, get some cash, and maybe the interest rate is 9%, whatever the interest rate is, it is. You're still going to win if you can figure out how to take that cash and put it in another asset that appreciates more than the interest that you're paying, right? So like, for example, you could take the money out and you could put it into real estate. Rental income from the real estate could pay back the loan, and most of these loans are interest-only loans, so you're only paying the interest.
So basically, you're saying that if I can allocate some money into like real estate investment for a unit, and that unit is paying back the investment, the initial Bitcoin loan, with the interest rate, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what I'm saying is pretty much it's a win-win, right?
It is a win-win.
It's called velocity of money, right?
Right, but you're leveraging. You're basically leveraging your Bitcoin to go purchase this property using some of that interest or that cash flow, some of that cash flow to pay back the Bitcoin. So basically, you're just cutting even.
Right.
There's no losses here.
There's no losses, and that's what the wealthy do. The wealthy don't spend their cash on stuff. They go into debt. But there's different types of debt. But they leverage debt. There's two different types of debt, right? So you got debt that you have collateral that you put up, which is what the wealthy do. And then you have debt that most people learn about, credit card debt, consumer debt. That's bad debt. That's not good debt. So I would encourage you, though, before you go into debt, good or bad, to make sure that whatever you need the money for, you have a plan before you actually leverage your Bitcoin. Because what happens is that it's goods and there's bad. There's a good side and a bad side to it. An adverse side. So here's the bad side to it. So Bitcoin, when you put your money up as collateral, your Bitcoin up as collateral, if the market dips drastically, they're going to ask you to put more collateral in to maintain that loan, right? So
Okay,
you have to have an
let's
idea.
let's say it was at 60, which it was probably around the highest it's been. It was around 60K. You took a loan from at that point, right? You leveraged that Bitcoin around that 60K mark. Went, made a purchase on something else. It dropped to 40, which we are around right now. You're saying that in order you would have to put an additional purchase additional Bitcoins for it to level back out.
Well, the numbers that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that scenario, not exactly
Yeah.
60, 40,
Yeah.
but the scenario, the example,
Around that.
the example is, depend on your loan to value, whatever amount of collateral you put in, they'll let you know if Bitcoin falls to X dollar amount, they're gonna have a call, that's like a margin call,
Right.
for you to put up more collateral to secure that loan, or you could get liquidated, right? So it's still a risk with anything that you do, right?
Right.
But if you're smart, and I'll give you a strategy that I'm going to be doing. So retirement, I'm going to use my Bitcoin for my retirement, and I'm going to pass my Bitcoin down to my daughter. That's what I'm going to do. And how am I going to do that? Since it appreciates 200% on average for the past 10 years, let's just say that it doesn't. Let's say it appreciates 100%. It's still appreciating, right?
Right.
So if I hold that asset, and let's say I take out a loan on that Bitcoin 5 years from today, when Bitcoin, let's say, I don't know what it's going to be. I'm going to just throw a number out, and don't quote me on this. I'm not saying I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what it's going to be, but let's just say that it's about 500,000 for one Bitcoin. It's not unrealistic.
Right.
I can leverage that 500. I can leverage one Bitcoin and maybe take out a loan to value that's really, really low. Let's say 5% loan to value. So that means it has to drop 95% for my loan to get liquidated.
Yeah.
And I'll take
it to be considered as a risk.
Right, to be a risk. So that's me mitigating the risk. So if I take that loan out and pull the cash out, I can live on that cash for the whole year. Let's say I take out 100,000, I have a 500,000, whatever 5% of 100 of a 500 is, whatever that is. Let's just say 100.
Right.
I gotta do the math.
I'll put it there.
Right. So, but the thing is, I live on that 100,000 for the whole year. And then the next year, Bitcoin is going to appreciate again another 100%. So it just went up again in value, right? So then I can take out another loan, pay off the previous loan. There's no more loan there, and this is a brand new loan that I have for another year. Now
and start the whole process all over again. Yeah, same strategy.
It's the same strategy.
Wash and repeat.
That's it, and it's real, and people are doing it, and you can do it, and the wealthy do it right now. You get what I'm saying? And I think I'm really passionate about generational wealth. With and kind of back off of Bitcoin a little bit, with the investment club that I'm a part of, we focus on group economics. We focus on pulling our resources together so that we can invest in assets that we couldn't invest in individually. And that's what we do. One of our biggest holdings right now, and I'm not going to tell you everything else, one of our biggest holdings is Bitcoin. And we do something called dollar cost averaging into that asset class every single month, into Bitcoin. Now, you as an individual, and I'm going to digress a little bit, because as an individual, before you invest in any asset, you have to know why you're investing. What's your goal?
Right.
Everybody has a different goal. So when you ask about, you're holding forever, but that doesn't mean everybody else, that's their goal. They may be like, well, when Bitcoin is 100,000, I'm cashing out. But you're cashing out, taking out cash, and you're putting your cash into the system that we just talked about. That's going to get eroded. So just to add, a little insight to as far as thought process in an investment, you got to know what type of investor you are before you invest in anything. You got to know your risk tolerance, so you know what the mix is, and then once you know that, then you can start diversifying properly, because okay, I'm not that a risky person, so I'm not going to put too much exposure to my portfolio to Bitcoin. Maybe I put 1%, 5%, whatever that number is. And maybe you put more into gold if you really believe in gold. Right. That's fine. Or you put some in real estate, but you got to be a little bit diversified. And I could get into that, because that part of the conversation, I'm a little more versed in, but that's how I would look at it as far as investing and borrowing from the Bitcoin. You got to know exactly what your goal is before you do it.
Yeah, I think that that's a lot of information that we really got to dive into. And there's a lot of things we can inject into that conversation to make it like more debatable, because everybody has their own perspective when it comes to investments. But I definitely agree that it has to be something that you have to have a game plan for. And there's a lot of truth in everything you said. And I love the strategy that you broke down, right? Because that is a strategy that we can implement over and over and over again. But the question I think, and before we start to like really wind down, because it's just a lot, but the question, how could you pass it down to your daughter, even though you're pulling from it, right? Because I think the question is, you're going to repeat that cycle. Are you going to train her to repeat that strategy?
Yeah, well, that 100%. Like right now, in Sky, you know what it is. But the thing is, we have to teach our kids what we're doing. We can't keep them in the dark. We have to teach them about money because they're not learning about it in school. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
and you came from Baruch, so
yeah, I mean,
you did a year in business.
I did all of that. Yeah, but I really learned outside of the system. To be honest with you, I learned outside from other people. Like I said, the biggest mentorship I got was when I was doing the Amway business actively. The people that I was around, very wealthy people, but they taught me about mindset, and wealth is a mindset, right? So I would encourage everyone to teach your kids about finances, right? Teach them about money and what money is. But she will be able to own the Bitcoin. So remember, the Bitcoin, once you have it,
it's transferable.
You can. And there's different things we didn't touch on, but I'm not going to get into it. But there's different processes. Like you could have this thing called a multi-sig wallet. And we didn't talk about holding the Bitcoin, because there's another thing too. When you have an asset like that, you have to protect it.
Yeah, put it off.
You have to take it offline, off the exchanges, and put it in a ledger or Trezor or any hardware wallet to keep it secure. But I will make sure that she's aware of how to do that, so that when it's time for her to do it, she knows how to do it. I didn't start doing this yet, but we've spoken about this where we're going to be sitting down and going through different aspects of investment, right? Because right now she goes to St. John's, and she's in school, so she has a big workload. But the key is you have to teach your kids about money, and if you don't teach them about money, you're doing them a disservice.
Yeah, I mean, this has been great. There's a lot of things that I really want to unpack, because there's a lot of compartments that we need to touch into, right, to really expand more on the information. And I think we're gonna have to like do a separate one. But for right now, one of the things that I wanted to pull away from this is how to leverage a Bitcoin, because a lot of people don't really talk about how to leverage it, why you have it right now without trading, and you want to have it for long term. So I'm glad you touched on that. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you and just wanted to ask you information, or when can they contact you at?
Well, I'm one of the dinosaurs of this internet age, so it's going to be an email. So right now you can reach me at Shane4523, Jordan 45 and 23 at iCloud.com. So you can send me emails if you have questions. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. As much value as I could add, I definitely would love to. And again, I appreciate you having me on, Stan. I'm extremely proud of what you're doing, and things that you're doing. The content that you're putting out is just invaluable and educating the people. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, man. We really try to get the right information out there to the right people, and it's something of value that it says a lot when we can have people like you on the show and really touch on several things, because there's so many perspectives, all right, and in our community, I don't think we get to see enough of that. Different concepts, different ideas, different positions, different businesses. We just want to try to touch on everything to give the people the right information. So when we have people like you that come on board and share your values, share your information, we're more than gracious about it, because we really appreciate it. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. We truly appreciate it. If you don't know by now, our social media, it's in the description below. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have a question that we would like to answer for you. And don't forget, guys, it starts now.